All right, welcome to another edition of Let's Talk Music, RVA. That's Richmond, Virginia. And we are here to try to reminisce on some of the music guys and all the influential people from that area in 1960s, 1970s, 1980s. And my old friend over there, Bill McGee, and he is my co-host. So I will turn it over to Bill, and he will introduce our special guest for the evening.
I'm going to tell you that this next gentleman is a dear friend of mine. When my group of Trussell was playing and Charles's group Eugene was playing, my uncle would always tell me, man, y'all need to be like the Funky Two. And cause the Funky Two is gigging, they play all the songs everybody want to hear, and they got the people dancing. They had the Bo 20, they had the Benedictine, they had the Back of the Mousetrap. They Funky Two players everywhere. The Funky Two was two guys. And the lead singer and the leader of the Funky Two is this gentleman that's joining us today. Welcome, Larry, to Let's Talk Music Richmond.
Thanks, fellas. Nice being here with you today. Right before we get to the Funky Two, when I was like 5 years old, my sisters had a gospel group. It's called the Jones Sisters. They recruited me, or my mother made me to sing with them. And I did that for about 6 months. And we were still known as the Jones Sisters, and finally somebody got smart and said something not right about it. So then we became Little Larry and the Jones Sisters. I had the pleasure to open up for a few really big gospel groups back in the day, in their heyday. And that was just by myself, but Harmonizing Four, Mahalia Jackson, on some pretty big venues. And now when I got about 11 or 12, I got managed and didn't want to sing with the girls anymore. And I had taught myself how to play the bass guitar. So one of my older brothers wanted me to play in his band. So he renamed the band Larry D and the Imperial Rockers. After that, we had another band. I had another band, and it was Larry D and the El Dorados. And all this time, Bill, I'm pretty certain you were at Virginia State during that time.
I was in Atlanta then.
Okay, all right.
Right.
Well, right after the El Dorados, somehow I got recruited to play with the Mustangs.
You kind of definitely giving us the information we need. But where you from?
From Dinwiddie County.
Oh, okay. So all of this,
country boy.
This Little Larry and the Jones girls.
We primarily sang in Dinwiddie and Petersburg.
But y'all came from Dinwiddie to play all over the Central Virginia area.
Exactly.
Okay, that's what I want to say. And y'all went to what school down Dinwiddie?
Dinwiddie Elementary, Southside High.
Who was a music teacher at Southside High?
Robert Harvey was my band director.
Mr. Harvey. Okay.
Yeah.
Now let me ask you a question. What did you play in the band?
I was a trumpet player in the band. I was also band captain.
You are a trained musician. You know how to read notes. That's the important part that people need to understand as we go forward.
I went to the Mustangs, and we were one of the better bands in Richmond, and we played a lot. I sang with Thelma Fields.
that name came up again, Charles.
Oh, yeah. Thelma Fields, and we should do some pretty nice duets together.
I bet you did.
Playing bass, and we worked a lot.
So when you guys were working in the Richmond area, did you ever play with the Evan Allen or the Sahara Club? Anything over that?
Yeah, a bunch of times. As a matter of fact, we backed up several groups at the Sahara Club. But the Mustangs, we played all over the state.
So now so doing your bookings, that was somebody like Johnny Wallace or Jimmy Winston or
Johnny Wallace may have done some gigs with us. The guy I was trying to remember, I just remembered him. He passed away, I think, last year. Delbert Turner was the drummer.
Delbert Turner.
Yeah, he's one of the nicest guys you will ever meet. And but he had obviously been in bands for years and years and years, and he had a lot of contact. And what happened was, I think I helped the band a lot other than just, musically. because a lot of people knew who I was. So we ended up getting a lot of gigs, not only in Richmond and the South Side of Virginia too.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. And some of the other guys, there are other guys, but I played with so many people, I can't remember everybody. To be honest.
So after you left the Mustangs, what did you do after that?
This is one of the most fun times in my life. When I left the Mustangs, and I quit because I'm kind of a businessman, music man, in that order. I got tired. The guys always being late for gigs, late for rehearsal. You know how band guys can be.
Sound like Charles Mann.
Yeah. So I quit, went home, and that Monday, went to a music store and bought myself a cheap keyboard. And I taught myself how to play keyboards well enough to accompany myself.
Right.
And I stayed in the woodshed for about 6 months. But while I was in the woodshed, some of the guys in Richmond knew that I was in between gigs. And for about 5 or 6 months, I guess I played with 7 or 8 different bands all over Richmond, Petersburg, and the state. They would call me at the last minute because the bass player was sick, out of town, got fired, quit, whatever. And I would go to these different gigs with no rehearsal, anything, and stand beside the guitar player or the keyboard player and do gigs. That was so much fun. After I got enough chords in my back pocket, you know, I already knew quite a few folks. I started doing gigs. I hired a guitar player from the Astronauts, good friend, he passed on, Dudai Walker.
Dudai. A lot of people have mentioned Dudai. Okay, go ahead.
Funky 2 was born.
Okay.
In about 6 to 8 months, I was booked up for almost a year on Fridays and Saturdays. And 90% of those gigs were private social events. Right. You know, like this club or that club. And we would gig like in Bill Jones.
And it was just the two of you guys working at that time? Just 2 of you? Just
my organ. I had a big old organ. And I loved it. Good thing I was young because I had nobody to help me. I lifted that big organ by myself and loaded in the back of a truck or U-Haul by myself and went to these gigs and played a full gig. You know, it had the electric drums and everything in it. So I think in some ways I was a little bit ahead of
you were ahead of the time. Charles, I went to see him out at Fort Lee when he and I first started associated musically. And this is probably mid-70s, late 70s, something like that. And man, he had, what was it, the NCO club or whatever your famous place, they used to book you out there all the time, lad. Was NCO club?
NCO club, offices sometime, and mostly NCO club.
He was at the NCO club, man. He had them rocking. Because he sang, Larry would have been the king of Southern Soul then. Because that's the kind of stuff he did. If it's a Joe Simon or Johnny Taylor, anything that you and us, we grew up on, that Rainy Night in Georgia. And Larry, if I had $1 for every time you sung a Rainy Night in Georgia, boy, I could pay my house off.
So he got that Brook Benton thing going on?
Man, he got them all going on. It won't let he could do Isaac Hayes. He could do Larry could basically sing anything that was really popping. He could do the Harold Melvin. He could do the Teddy Pendergrass. He could do it all.
Well, I'm glad he didn't run in my circles too much. I wouldn't have had a job.
Well, he did. Go ahead.
You know, people ask me sometimes about this person and that person, and I do know of a lot of people, and I know quite a few guys, musicians too. But the truth is, I worked so much, I rarely had an opportunity to hear many bands because I was working all the time. Right. He'll mention Fort Lee. I went years, sometimes 5 or 6 nights a week at Fort Lee. Right. And we were doing so well. And this is crazy. And you know, you had to sign contracts in advance for places like Fort Lee. They had a deal with me. I had a 6 night a week contract, like indefinite. And they said, anytime you want to come in Sunday, you can come in on Sunday too. Just call us and give us an hour's notice. So when people call the club, we know you're going to have a crowd. But I think it was more, I'll be honest with you, I think it was more than just whether I could play and sing well. It was a little gimmickry at that time to have one dude that could put out that much music, you know?
Well, you were ahead of the game on the technology with that. That must have been that Rhodes organ is what you had. What kind of organ was that? Because I remember those organs. They were real popular at the time. That had the rhythm section inside and all the extra sound effects.
Yeah, but it wasn't like a portable Yamaha or something back in the day.
No. It was a big organ. It was a big organ.
It was Lowry organ. It wasn't
Lowry. That's right, Lowry organ.
Big organ. But you know what? I realized a bunch of stuff now after the years go by and you get to think about it. You know how musicians sometimes they can play too much, too many notes, too fancy, just because they know how to do it?
Right.
Well, this organ had a limited number of beats.
Yeah.
And there was one beat in particular that folks, it was just right in the pocket, right? And I bet I played 95%
with that one beat.
Tempo songs on that beat, and we could really rock them.
Right. Yeah, I remember the Lowry organs. They used to sell them in shopping centers.
Well, look, Charles, hold up.
I worked in one of the stores.
I was getting ready to tell him that story that I always shocked Larry because here's a little background on Larry Jones. And Larry, we sometimes try to tell other people's story for him to make it entertaining so people will know that you're well known. But see, Larry ended up getting married young. Okay, this is the part that he hadn't said is he married young, married his high school sweetheart, started a family young, and really, Charles, unlike many of the rest of us, he went to work raising a family and taking care of his family. So he was a businessman by day, he's done every kind of business you could imagine from sales, and we're gonna get to your broadcasting history, Larry, in a minute. But he did sales and everything else, and I met him for the first time. He doesn't even remember as much, but he was at the mall. Remember what you just said? He was at the mall at the keyboard store.
Right, the keyboard store, right.
And he was demoing these keyboards for the people at the mall. And I was saying like, well, yeah, they're gonna sell a whole bunch of them joints because that dude right there is rocking it. And everybody gonna get home and try to figure out why I don't sound like this dude.
Well, that Lowry organ was really popular during that time. They had them all over the country, selling them in shopping centers,
right? Because
they were ahead of their game, ahead of the technology by having that accompaniment that went with the organ. So you can get a whole lot of various sounds out of that.
I don't know what you were doing at that time, Bill, but Charles, it was almost like a whirlwind in Petersburg right during the period when Clarence and Jonathan, the Impacts, with Spradley and Ron Harper.
Right.
All those guys, used to either gig with me or try to be gigging with me, or we were backing up. And I had a few inquiries and opportunities, but like Bill said, I went up to Philly International and they did publish some songs of mine at Mighty 3 Music. But I think I blew that because I got kind of impatient with them.
Charles, that's another example of all of us going through Philly at some point. See, Larry, we've talked in with other people, especially we've already talked to Clarence. And we've interviewed a lot of other people, and a lot of us have all gone through Philly. Like Trussell, we did all our albums in Philly. We did the thing with Evelyn Champagne King out of Philly. Of course, the Joe Jefferson, the Major Harris, and the Spradleys, and William Wynn, and Milton Johnson, and all that. We have documented all of that history and how it happened from the late 60s to the early 70s. See, so the difference that is with you, Charles, that I wanted to say about Larry, which he's already covered, is Larry was booked so heavily that guys who gigged like us never really got a chance to see him much because a lot of his gigs were private gigs. That's why I named the Benedictine and like a club like the 533 in Richmond
Yeah.
or different clubs. So remember when Mousy was talking about how Dinwiddie people would book the back of the Mousetrap up all the time. People from the county, Prince George, and all that. Larry Jones, the Funky Two, were the go-to because, first of all, they didn't cost as much as a bigger band. They played all the right music like Ujima. Like y'all, they played all the hits because Larry did all the hits. He ain't trying to be playing some Larry D music like that. He was playing the music people wanted to hear. My uncle told me, said, "Man, y'all need to be like the Funky Two."
I was always early for gigs.
Yeah, that's good.
Literally early for gigs. I learned a long time ago as a youngster. If you want to have a successful gig, get there early. Then whoever books you is going to be relaxing in a good mood.
That's right.
And you hit them wrong notes or you make a mistake, they're going to be in a good mood. They're going to like you and they're going to want to give you more work.
Yeah.
And people knew when they booked me, they didn't have to worry about it because I'm going to be there maybe an hour early. And a half an hour before the gig start, I'm sitting there drinking a soda.
Club owners like Bill Jones told me this. And what you just said was exactly true. He said a lot of people ride by the club on the way from home or on the way other to see if anybody's there yet, if the band is there, or whatever. And
Right.
if they come by and they see that the band's van the van is sitting there, the band and unloaded like Charles's Winnebago that he had. Charles, you remember that whole thing about your Winnebago being outside 24 when the band, everybody know that the band is there. It's on. They go home to get ready. And that's why the club owners loved you, Larry, for that. Because when you show up early, the word is out that it's on tonight, baby. It's on.
Yeah. The social clubs loved it a lot too. Because
Right.
you had a committee of one or two people that are
Right.
responsible for everything going well.
Right.
So, Larry, let me
bring a sigh of relief and they saw you walking in the door.
let me move ahead here. When did you get into broadcasting?
It was somewhere around 1979 and 80, right when Magic 99 first went on the air out of Petersburg, and everybody was talking about it was Moses Malone radio station, which it wasn't and never was.
Right.
And along with all the gigs, I went there in sales department, and that was probably the best thing I ever did from a career standpoint because that kind of launched my broadcast career, and I did really well with that.
This man is like a salesman. He is a salesman. He had been, but remember, he had a family. And that's what, Charles, what made me admire this guy so much is his focus was there because he had a family at a young age. And a lot of the rest of us didn't have that laser focus on making money that Larry Jones had. Because he had to feed his family, he had to take care of his family. And
that apparently comes from his upbringing as far as structure is concerned.
Yes.
Because he was also very punctual, and that is what is needed in the business world.
Yes.
Because you're representing, and then that carried over to his gigs as well. And so he had a lot of structure. And I'm willing to bet that Mama had a lot to do with that.
Oh, I don't think there's any question about it, but my mother and my father, my whole family, growing up in Dinwiddie, there were certain things that just were automatic. It wasn't discussed. It wasn't preached to you. You'd go to school. You wouldn't get into no trouble. You would work. In the summer, you do your chores. You were able to go out and have activities, playing bands and do all the things. But that's just the way it was. And when you graduated from high school, if you didn't go to college, I had a few siblings to go to college, but if you didn't go to college, you went to work and you took care of yourself. It wasn't a whole lot in between.
That's right.
Yeah.
And
Old school.
A lot of money for you to inherit,
Right,
There
old
wasn't a lot of
school.
money for you to fall back on anything, so you didn't even think about what you had to do. You went out and did what you had to do.
Well,
Right.
man, you had a large family, and I don't think I've ever asked you this question. I've known you for over 40 years. How many brothers and sisters did you have?
It was 10 brothers and sisters. I did a little bit of road work, you know, in a few adjacent to Virginia, in Virginia, different places, hotels and things. But my kids were really small then. My wife didn't work. She didn't have to work. And I was able to take my wife and kids with me. So, you know, I'm cool. But after about 3 or 4 weeks, I started having these migraine headaches, and I had never had a headache in my life. To say I was perfectly fine. Kept going to the doctor, nothing wrong with you, nothing wrong with you. Make a long story short, I was gigging at the General Washington Inn up in Fredericksburg. And for whatever reason, we decided, you know, I didn't like doing it. But I didn't think it was that big a deal. I hated it.
Right.
I'll never forget. My nephew came to help me load the trailer Sunday morning early after I finished gigging Saturday night. And I drove to Petersburg. Man, I'll never forget this. I pull up into my driveway. And when I opened the door, I noticed I didn't have a headache. I haven't had a migraine headache since. Everything is not meant for everybody.
Yeah.
I wasn't supposed to get lucky and get no deal with no record company
Right.
and deal with everything else that comes with it. Because believe me, I know what comes with it.
Yeah, that's good. That's some good news, Larry. That's some good. So, okay, so that's some good words of wisdom to share because a lot of people don't understand. Charles and I, we have touched on the fact that everybody's not meant to live in New York or Philly or places where music was popping off. LA is not for everybody.
That's true.
And sometimes peace of mind and your peace of heart, well, that's what you just touched on. Peace of mind is better than a piece of money. You kind of grew into the radio industry, and tell us a little bit more about that. Because Charles, everybody who worked in Richmond as a radio DJ or whatever, know this man right here as Mr. Jones, Larry D, because they all worked. Larry was in charge of sales at a lot of stations and a lot of things.
Well, Magic 99, I became the local sales manager after about 2 or 3 months there, you know, because I'm a hustler. I'm just a hustler. I'm running around selling heads, man, selling spots. And I was doing pretty good there. 2 black doctors in Richmond, they own the radio station, WKIE, 1540 AM. Right. And they recruited me to come over and be general manager. Now, that was also a fun time in my life because the station didn't have a great signal or whatever. Now, this I'm really proud of. I don't know if either of you guys remember 15K, the beat of the city.
Yes.
Well, what it was, when rap first started getting to be popular, we had one of the first all rap radio stations on the entire East Coast.
On the East Coast. See, Charles was gone by then, Charles.
Yeah.
You were gone.
Cool J, Fat Boys, all of them, Public Enemy, they didn't just come by the radio stations. They would come by and hang out. We were able to take about 25 to 30% of the ratings for teens in Richmond from the big stations like Power 92 and Q94 and stuff, with an AM daytime radio station. But anyway, I had a little success there. And I left there and I went to work for the Sinclairs at Power 92 FM. And I became the general sales manager at that station, which is a much bigger radio station. And I did quite good there. And I think I stayed there 5 or 6 years. And then these same doctors were able to buy 2 more FM radio stations. And they recruited me to come back and run it. And
hey, look, now I'm gonna out you on this. Didn't they offer you a little piece of the pie?
Yeah, I had a piece. Yeah. I had
a little ownership in these, Charles. And we don't know too many brothers that we know that own some part of radio station there.
Yeah, I had a nice little piece of those radio stations, and they did really, really well. And we ended up selling them in about 2 years' time, and the multiple was really nice. You know, we did pretty good with that. started in the 80s with Magic 99, 99.3 in Petersburg. It was all
Right.
FM black music.
Right.
But it was like the late 90s when we ended up selling the radio stations to Radio One.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, the late
So
90s.
so he had like a 20-something year history or more in radio here. And let me say this to you. Larry crossed over to the other side because we interviewed Jose and we've interviewed all these other cats. And he was the guy that they were buying advertising from for their gigs and the promotion things.
I know all those guys quite well. It was interesting.
You were a very important part of the music industry in this area for over 40 years, but it wasn't always well known and in front of the mic and big publicity, Charles. He was doing stuff behind the scenes with music and being a professional performer and everybody else. When he taught music, a lot, he knew what he was talking about. So thank you, Larry D, for being a good friend over the years, and give your family our regards. And thank you, Charles. This ends this version of Let's Talk Music Richmond.
All right.
Thanks, guys. My pleasure.
Have a good evening, guys.
Thank you very much.